"Don't hug Grandma, she smells terrible." The words cut through the kitchen like a knife. I froze in the hallway, tray in hand, hearing the clink of plates and the small giggle that followed. My name, Evelyn Hart, 52 years old, retired nurse, mother of one, felt like a ghost in my own home. My daughter-in-law's voice carried a sharpness I hadn't noticed before, or maybe I just never wanted to. My 3 grandkids looked uneasy, staring down at their plates, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. I stepped back quietly, the smell of roast chicken and soap thick in the air. The light over the sink flickered, bouncing off the damp towel hanging on the oven door. For years, Sunday dinners had been my ritual. Food, laughter, a house full of life. They were my proof that love survived the grind of ordinary disappointments. That warmth now felt staged, rehearsed, and suddenly fragile. After they left that evening, I washed the dishes slowly, letting the warm water numb my hands. I noticed the small teacup on the counter, the one my son had painted when he was 8, chipped but still beautiful. I wrapped it carefully in a towel and set it aside. It wasn't about the cup, it was about memory and how care turns invisible when people stop looking for it. When I sat in the living room later, the phone buzzed beside me. Her name flashed across the screen. "Can you babysit tomorrow?" she asked, voice sweet, too sweet. "We need a night out." I almost said no. Almost. But something in me wanted to see what would happen if I agreed. Maybe I wanted to test how far the performance would go, or maybe I just needed to know if the kindness I gave still meant anything. "Sure," I said, forcing a smile into my voice. "But first, didn't I mention—" I paused. The silence on her end told me she was waiting for the condition, the catch, the line that reminded her I wasn't just furniture in this house. "I'll need you to drop them off before 7, I said lightly. "I have things to do." A lie, but a small one. I wanted her to think I had plans, a life still pulsing beyond her convenience. She agreed quickly, the relief in her tone almost insulting. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling fan, turning lazily above me. My room smelled faintly of lavender and detergent. I reached for my phone and scrolled through old messages. Birthday photos, school events, grocery reminders. The last text from my son said, "Don't worry about the bills this month, Mom. We've got it covered." I hadn't asked for help. I never did. Money was just another way she measured control, wrapped in gestures that looked like generosity. I turned off the lamp. The house settled into quiet, the kind of silence that exposes everything you tried not to hear. The faint hum of the fridge filled the space where family laughter used to live. I thought of that moment in the kitchen, her words hanging like smoke. Maybe she said it because she thought the children wouldn't remember, or because she needed someone to be less than her. But I remembered every syllable. Tomorrow would be different. I didn't know how yet, but I could feel it, the small, steady resolve of a woman who's been underestimated one time too many. As I closed my eyes, I whispered to myself, "Tomorrow, they'll see what I heard." "You trust me with them after what you said?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. She stood at the door, coat still on, pretending not to hear. My son glanced at me, avoiding my eyes. It was 7 sharp, right on time, as if punctuality could erase cruelty. I forced a smile, told the kids to hang their jackets, and shut the door behind them. The air in the house felt heavier than usual, carrying the smell of leftover dinner and the faint perfume she always wore when she wanted to impress strangers. I went to the kitchen, set out 3 plates, and warmed the pasta I'd made earlier. The lamp over the table buzzed softly, giving off a warm yellow glow. It used to be our family's comfort light, the same one that had lit up birthday cakes and late-night homework. Now it just reminded me how small the circle of warmth had become. The kids sat quietly, pushing food around. I tried to keep things normal. "You can stay up till 9, I said, hoping the promise of a later bedtime would pull them out of that uneasy silence. The youngest smiled, but the other 2 didn't. After a minute, the oldest looked up and whispered, "Mom said not to hug too long." My throat tightened. I didn't ask what else she'd said. Children remember tone more than words, and theirs was already colored by her bitterness. I wanted to defend myself, to say that love doesn't expire when someone lies about it, but the truth sat too heavy. So instead, I just said, "That's fine, sweetheart. Let's finish dinner." Later, I tucked them in, one by one. The smell of baby shampoo clung to their pillows, mixed with the faint scent of fabric softener from the blankets. I read from the old storybook they used to love, my voice steady, even as my heart broke on every page. "Good night," I whispered, brushing the youngest child's forehead. She reached out, her fingers tracing the wrinkles near my eyes. "You're soft, Grandma," she said. "Not smelly." I laughed quietly, blinking back tears. After they fell asleep, I stood by the doorway for a while, just watching. The room looked the same as always, but I knew the feeling had changed. Trust was now rationed like something expensive, given out in careful doses. I turned off the lamp and walked to my room. The clock read 9:46 p.m. Outside, the street was quiet except for a dog barking somewhere in the distance. I picked up my phone and opened our text thread. My fingers hesitated, then typed, "We'll talk tomorrow." A small, polite message. But underneath it sat the real meaning. I heard you. I saw you. I'm done pretending. There was no reply, just the read notification glowing back at me. That tiny word felt colder than any insult. I set the phone down and reached for my perfume bottle, the one she'd given me last Christmas. I sprayed it once into the air, then wiped the nozzle clean with a tissue, as if erasing fingerprints from a weapon I never meant to use. Lying in bed, I thought about money for the first time in weeks. The pension check would come next Tuesday. I'd planned to use part of it for the twins' new shoes, but maybe I'd hold on to it this time. She didn't need to know how much I still gave. Every kindness had turned into leverage lately. The clock ticked toward midnight. I listened to the rhythm, steady and mechanical, the sound of a life that refused to stop even when people tried to silence it. I closed my eyes and whispered into the darkness, "Tomorrow, truth walks through that door." "You used my card again?" The words came out sharp, like the edge of the paper I was holding. The receipt lay on the counter, the ink still dark. It wasn't mine. Wrong store, wrong items, wrong total. She must have thought I wouldn't notice. The morning sun fell across the kitchen tiles, turning the mug stain on the table into a pale ring. I stood there for a long moment, the silence of the house pressing in. It wasn't the first time she'd done it, just the first time I caught her this bold. My pension came in 2 days ago, a small deposit that I'd split between bills, groceries, and the twins' upcoming birthdays. Every dollar had a place, and now one of them was missing. I pulled my phone from the charger and called the bank. "Good morning," I said. My voice sounded calm, almost rehearsed. "I'd like to report an unauthorized charge." The man on the line asked questions, polite but detached. I answered them all, reading the receipt word for word. Greenway Market. Organic produce. Household cleaning. A neat little lie wrapped in responsibility. I knew exactly who'd made it. By 9:15 a.m., the charge was reversed and my new PIN confirmed. A petty act, maybe, but it made the coffee taste stronger. Power, even in small doses, has its own flavor. When the phone rang again, I didn't need to check who it was. "Why would you embarrass me like that?" she snapped. "It was just groceries." "You mean groceries I never asked for?" I said. "You can't even remember what you tell me to buy," she shot back. "You should be grateful someone's helping you." I let her talk. Every accusation sounded like a script she'd practiced, every word turning the story around until I was the villain. Then came the next voice, my son's. He must have been standing beside her because his tone was softer but poisoned by loyalty. "Mom, can we just not make this a big deal? She said she'll pay you back." There it was again, the pattern I'd ignored for years. Her grievance first, my defense second. This time, I didn't bother explaining. "I'm not angry," I said evenly. "I just want to handle my own money." He sighed, the kind of sigh that comes when someone believes keeping peace matters more than keeping truth. "Fine," he said, before the line clicked dead. I sat down, wrapping both hands around my mug. The warmth had faded, but I drank anyway. The receipt still lay on the counter beside the wallet she once insisted I let her organize. I opened it, checked the cash, still there. I hadn't carried much since retirement, just enough for small things like stamps or a bus fare if I ever needed to escape the house for an hour. Looking out the window, I caught a reflection of myself, hair undone, robe faded, eyes still steady. I wasn't weak. I'd just been too kind for too long. Money is never just about money. It's control disguised as care, dependence sold as love. I used to think family couldn't turn transactional, but now I saw it clearly. Every gift she gave had a tag attached, invisible until I stopped saying thank you. I took the receipt, folded it twice, and slipped it into my drawer beside the others. Evidence, I thought. Not for revenge, but for remembrance. When the phone buzzed again, I ignored it. Instead, I opened my notebook and wrote one line. Never lend kindness to people who keep receipts of it. It looked too poetic for what it meant. Still, I left it there. Words, like money, could hold power when saved for the right moment. The clock on the microwave blinked 10:27. I had half the day left to feel whatever this was, anger, grief, relief, then move forward. I made a new pot of coffee, humming a tune I hadn't remembered in years. The bitterness suited me. I whispered to the empty kitchen, "If they want my money, they'll have to earn my silence." "She's been forgetting things again," she said. Her voice carried over the table like a whisper meant to travel. The neighbors laughed softly, unsure whether to join in or look at me. I was standing by the counter pouring tea, pretending not to hear. But every word landed sharp and clear. "She misplaced some cash last week," she added, her tone dripping with false concern. "I'm starting to worry." The smell of roasted chicken and wine filled the room, but suddenly everything tasted metallic. The clink of cutlery was the only sound for a few seconds. Then someone changed the subject to the weather. I kept my back turned, my hands steady, though the kettle's steam brushed against my skin. I'd learned long ago that dignity doesn't always shout. It sometimes stands still and waits for everyone else to see the lie. When I turned, she smiled like nothing had happened. "Oh, Mom," she said sweetly, "did you take your pills tonight?" Her hand reached for my shoulder. I stepped aside. "No," I said quietly, "but thank you for reminding me." The words were calm, almost polite. Her smile faltered, just long enough for me to see what she'd wanted. Pity from others, control from me. I gave her neither. I carried the plates to the sink. One of the guests, a woman from down the street, offered to help. "I've got it," I told her. She hesitated, then nodded. That hesitation told me everything. Someone else had noticed. Witnesses were forming, whether they wanted to or not. I washed each dish slowly, letting the warm water run over my hands. The laughter behind me grew forced, thin. I could hear my son trying to lighten the air. "Mom's always been a little absent-minded," he said, chuckling. My heart sank, not from his words, but from how easily they came. Loyalty can bend without breaking, but I could feel his starting to crack. I finished cleaning, dried my hands, and looked into the window above the sink. The reflection showed a woman older than I remembered, lines deeper, eyes colder, but still steady. I wasn't fragile. I was patient, and patience, I realized, could become a weapon if you held it long enough. Later, when everyone left, she came into the kitchen. "You seemed quiet tonight," she said. "Everything okay?" "You tell me," I replied. She blinked, surprised. "What do you mean?" I said, "it's strange to hear about my memory from someone who keeps forgetting her own lies." Her face froze. "You must have misheard." "I heard every word." For a moment we stood in silence, the kind that hums louder than any argument. Then she shrugged, collected her glass, and left. When the door closed, I looked around the room. The empty chairs, the half-full wine glasses, the crumbs on the tablecloth. I thought about how many meals I'd paid for, how many dinners I'd hosted to make everyone feel like family. I'd even covered the grocery bill that week when she said their account was tight. It had been a small act of help, $140 gone without a second thought. But now it felt like paying for my own humiliation. I wiped the table and set aside a photo frame that had tipped over during the evening. It showed my son at 12, grinning with frosting on his cheek. I touched the glass, then set it upright again. People change, I reminded myself, but evidence doesn't. Every remark, every sneer, these were notes in a story I'd stopped writing but now needed to finish. Before bed, I opened the small box in my drawer, the one where I kept old medicine bottles, expired prescriptions, and things I didn't need but couldn't throw away. I slipped a folded napkin inside. On it, I wrote the date and one line. Dinner with neighbors. Public lie told about my memory. It wasn't much, but it was proof. Proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Proof that someone wanted me to look weak. I stared at the neat handwriting, the way the ink spread slightly at the edges, and felt something settle inside me. Resolve. I whispered to the dark, "Next time, I'll make sure they hear my version." "You forgot the twins' presents again?" Her tone was sharp enough to slice through the quiet of the morning. I was setting the table, folding napkins, trying to make the birthday breakfast feel normal. The words stopped me cold. "I didn't forget," I said, steady but tired. "They're right where I put them." She crossed her arms. "I looked everywhere. Maybe you imagined buying them." I turned to face her. The hallway mirror caught both of us, her, polished and certain, me, holding a half-buttered slice of toast like it could keep me grounded. "Check again," I said. "I already did," she snapped. "Don't make this about me." I finished my tea, every swallow tasting bitter. She'd found a new way to twist the knife, make me doubt myself, make me small in front of the children. The twins were upstairs, their laughter echoing faintly. I thought of the night I bought those presents, weeks ago, before my pension deposit hit. 2 toy cars, red and blue, with their initials on the sides. It had taken me an extra week to afford them, but I wanted the boys to know I still thought ahead, still cared. After breakfast, I went to the hallway closet. The air inside smelled faintly of her perfume. My hands brushed against the fabric of her jacket, and there it was, the gift bag, tucked beneath it, still sealed. My chest tightened. She'd hidden it deliberately, then accused me of forgetting. The pattern was clear now. Every act of kindness had to come through her hands. Every gift, every gesture, filtered until I barely existed. I carried the bag to the living room and placed it on the coffee table. No announcement, no confrontation, just proof, sitting where everyone could see it. When she came downstairs later, she froze for half a second, then smiled. "Oh, you found them," she said lightly. "I must have moved them when I was cleaning." "Of course," I replied. My son walked in from the yard, holding the twins' soccer ball. He looked at me, then at her. Something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty, guilt, exhaustion. "Let's not fight today," he said quietly. "It's the kid's birthday." I nodded. "You're right." But inside, I felt a shift. Silence, I realized, wasn't peace. It was permission. When the children came running in, their faces bright, I handed them the presents myself. Their excitement filled the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. They didn't know the cost behind those smiles, the hours of budgeting, the small sacrifices, the battles fought in whispers. But I did. And watching her stand there, smiling like she'd been part of it, burned worse than the lie itself. She handed out cake slices afterward, laughing too loudly, making sure every guest saw her as the generous one. I watched, calm and still. Every move she made was about ownership, over gestures, over people, over image. But today, I'd learned her trick. She needed me silent to win. Later that night, when everyone was gone, I gathered the wrapping paper from the floor. The edges were soft and torn, streaked with icing from small fingers. I folded each piece neatly and slipped them into my notebook, the one where I kept bills, receipts, and quiet truths. I wrote under today's date. She hid the gifts, claimed I forgot. Control through kindness. It wasn't just a note, it was evidence. And in a house built on manipulation, evidence was survival. At 8:30 p.m., I stood in the kitchen rinsing dishes. The mirror across the hall reflected her silhouette, arms folded, watching me. "You didn't have to make a scene," she said. "I didn't," I replied. "I just stopped covering yours." For a second, she didn't move. Then she smiled again, that same polite, empty smile that had fooled everyone else. "You should rest," she said. "It's been a long day." "Yes," I said quietly. "It has." I turned off the faucet, dried my hands, and looked straight into that mirror. My reflection wasn't timid anymore. It was tired, but awake. The silence I'd wrapped around myself for months had finally cracked open, and the truth was starting to breathe. I whispered to the empty room, "My silence ends tonight." "Are you all right? She said you fell." The knock came just after 9. I was rinsing dishes, half listening to the hum of the heater when I opened the door. My neighbor, Linda, stood there clutching her scarf, her eyes wide with concern. "I heard you had a bad fall," she said. "She told us you might not be answering the phone." For a moment, I just stared at her. "I didn't fall," I said quietly. "Who told you that?" She hesitated. "Your daughter-in-law mentioned it yesterday at the grocery store. She said you've been forgetful lately. I wanted to check in." Forgetful. The same word again. I smiled thinly. "That was kind of you," I said, stepping aside. "But I'm fine." Linda's eyes flickered toward the kitchen. "You sure?" she asked softly. "You look pale." "I'm fine," I repeated. The lie sat heavy in my mouth, not because I was unwell, but because I was done defending myself. She nodded, clearly uncomfortable, and after a few more pleasantries, she left. I closed the door and leaned against it, staring at the light spilling through the doorway window. That faint glow looked warmer than any voice in this house had sounded for months. So now she was telling neighbors I'd fallen. A new story for the week. Sympathy from strangers, credibility for her next lie. I walked to the living room and pulled the old notebook from the drawer. I'd used it years ago for grocery lists and bill reminders. Now it would serve another purpose. I wrote the date, then one line. False claim about a fall, told to neighbor. It felt small, but it was something. A mark of truth in a sea of distortion. I flipped through the earlier pages, adding details I'd been carrying in my head. The hidden gift bag, the missing card charge, the dinner lie. Each event connected like pieces of a puzzle I wished I didn't have to finish. The clock read 9:25 p.m. I sat at the table, listening to the house settle. Upstairs, drawers opened and shut, her usual routine before bed. Every sound told me more than her words ever did. Power didn't need shouting. It lived in control, in silence weaponized until it suffocated you. I picked up the phone and called Margaret, my oldest friend. She answered on the second ring. "I was just thinking of you," she said. Her voice had the kind of steadiness that reminded me of who I used to be. "Margaret," I said, "you were right. It's getting worse." She was quiet for a moment. "What happened now?" "She's telling people I've fallen, that I'm confused. They're starting to believe her." "Don't confront her," Margaret said firmly. "That's what she wants, something she can twist. You stay calm. Record what happens. Dates, names, everything. Let her build her story while you build the truth." I exhaled slowly. "That's what I'm doing," I said, tapping the notebook with my pen. "But I don't know how much longer I can live like this." "You can," she said. "You're stronger than she knows. Just promise me one thing. Don't let her make you doubt yourself again." I swallowed hard. "I promise." After we hung up, I stared at the notebook. Its pages were thin, but they felt heavier than anything else in the room. This wasn't revenge. It was preservation. A record of who I really was before her stories rewrote me. A soft sound broke my thoughts, the door creaking open behind me. She stood there, pretending surprise. "You're still up?" "Couldn't sleep," I said. "Just writing." Her eyes darted to the notebook. "What about?" "Bills," I said. "You know how forgetful I am." She gave a small, controlled laugh. "Try to rest, all right? You've been overworking yourself." When she walked away, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The doorframe still caught the edge of that dim light, and for a moment it made the air look softer. But softness was an illusion. I turned another page in the notebook and wrote, "Told community I fell. Neighbor checked in. Responded calmly." Then I underlined the word calmly twice. It wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about discipline. About surviving her version of reality long enough to prove my own. I closed the notebook and placed it beside the phone. Tomorrow, I'd take it to Margaret. I needed another set of eyes on the truth, someone who'd believe the pattern before it hardened into reputation. I looked once more toward the hallway, where the light had finally gone out, and whispered, "Tomorrow, Margaret will see the ledger. You'll thank me for managing your money." That's how she said it, bright, confident, as if she were doing me a favor. We were standing at the teller's counter, my small folder of papers between us. The pen in her hand gleamed under the overhead lights, her fingers tapping like she already owned the account. I smiled. "I didn't ask anyone to manage my money," I said. She turned to the teller with that sugary tone she reserved for strangers. "We're just updating her profile," she said. "Joint access, easier for family emergencies." The teller looked unsure. "We'll need the account holder's written consent," he said carefully. Her smile tightened. "She's right here. You can ask her." He did. "Ma'am, would you like to authorize this joint access?" I straightened my shoulders. "No," I said. "I came to withdraw, not to share." The air shifted. Her pen froze mid-air. I could feel the fury radiating beside me, hidden behind that public calm. "You're overreacting," she hissed. "I was just trying to help." "Help isn't something you take," I said softly. "It's something you're asked to give." The teller nodded, relieved. "Then we'll keep it as is," he said. We left in silence. Outside, the afternoon light was sharp, almost blinding. She walked fast, her heels striking the pavement like small accusations. I followed at my own pace, the folder clutched tightly in my hand. Inside it was everything. My savings, the pension I'd earned over 30 years, the security that made me feel still independent. Halfway to the car, she spun around. "Do you really think I'd steal from you?" I met her eyes. "I think you've already tried." Her face flushed deep red. "You're being paranoid." "Maybe," I said, but the teller didn't seem confused. She didn't reply. The drive home was silent except for the sound of her ring tapping the steering wheel, a rhythm that used to mean boredom, but now sounded like control. When we pulled into the driveway, she didn't wait for me to get out. She grabbed her purse and went straight inside, slamming the door behind her. I sat there for a minute, gripping the folder. The car smelled faintly of her perfume, a sweetness that made my stomach turn. I used to associate that scent with care, with family dinners, with trust. Now it clung to everything I owned, like a reminder of intrusion. At 2:15 p.m., I called Margaret. She tried to add her name to my account, I told her. Did she succeed? No. The teller stopped. Her. Margaret exhaled. Good. You need to make that official. Write it down. Time, date, place. Then call the senior center tomorrow. Ask for the legal advisor. They help with cases like this all the time. I don't want it to become a fight, I said quietly. It already is, she replied. You just haven't been calling it one. That line sat heavy in my mind long after I hung up. I walked to the living room where the late sunlight touched the photo frame on the mantel. The twins' picture stared back at me, their innocent smiles caught in a world that hadn't yet learned deceit. For them, I told myself. Every step I took from now on had to be for them, to show what respect should look like, even when it costs peace. I went to my bedroom and opened the drawer where I kept my bracelet and papers. The drawer used to stay unlocked. Not anymore. I placed the folder inside, turned the key, and slipped it into the pocket of my cardigan. Downstairs, I could hear her on the phone. Her voice was calm again, sweet, the mask restored. "She's getting forgetful," she was saying to someone. "I'm just trying to keep things organized." I wanted to shout, to tear the phone away and tell whoever was listening that I remembered everything, that her lies were sharp, deliberate, measured. But instead, I walked back to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. The sound of the faucet grounded me. The coolness steadied my hands. I whispered to myself, "She thinks control comes through money. She's wrong." It wasn't about the account. It was about identity, my right to exist without permission. Later that evening, I wrote in my notebook again. Attempted to add her name to bank account. Blocked. Teller confirmed policy requires written consent. Then, below that line, I added one more sentence. Tomorrow, contact legal advisor. I closed the notebook, slid it beside my locked drawer, and glanced at the clock. 8:40 p.m. The house was quiet now. Too quiet. As I switched off the kitchen light, my reflection caught in the window. The woman staring back looked older, yes, but not weaker. I realized I wasn't documenting fear anymore. I was documenting strength. I turned toward the hallway and said softly, "Tomorrow, I'll put it in writing." "This notice protects us both." That's what I said as I placed the envelope on the table. My voice was steady, but my hand trembled slightly. She didn't take it right away. She just stared at the seal like it was an insult, not a formality. My son stood by the kitchen counter, arms crossed, pretending to scroll through his phone. He always did that when he didn't want to pick a side. "It's from the legal clinic," I said. "They helped me draft it." She finally reached for the paper. Her manicured nails scraped the edge of the envelope before sliding it open. The kitchen clock ticked above us. Each second felt heavier than the last. She read the first paragraph, stopped, then started again, slower this time. Her lips tightened. I watched her eyes narrow as she reached the line that confirmed it. All financial accounts, property, and savings remain solely under my authority. She folded the paper once, twice, then set it down. "So, you don't trust me," she said. I answered quietly. "I trust rules more than promises." Her laugh was short and sharp. "You're turning this house into a courtroom." "It already became one," I said. "I'm just putting it in writing." For a moment, nobody spoke. The clock ticked again. 8:10 p.m. Louder now, like it was marking our distance. My son shifted uncomfortably. "Mom," he said, "isn't this a bit extreme?" "No," I said. "It's necessary." She cut in before he could answer. "You've let outsiders poison you. Legal clinics, advisors, friends who don't even live here. They don't understand this family." I met her gaze. "They understand power, and they taught me how to keep mine." Her jaw clenched. I could see the red blooming across her neck. "You'll regret humiliating me," she whispered. "I've already regretted staying quiet," I said. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was containment, the kind that comes before an explosion. I gathered the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it in the folder with my other documents. The same folder I'd locked after the bank visit. Dinner that night felt like a play no one wanted to perform. Plates clinked, forks scraped, but no one spoke. Even the twins, usually noisy and bright, picked at their food without a word. The only sound was that clock, steady and relentless. I wanted to reach up and stop it, to make the world freeze for a moment so I could breathe without pressure. But that's not how life works. You can't pause time when someone's rewriting your future. I caught my son looking at me again, torn between two loyalties that should never have been enemies. I almost pitied him. Almost. But I couldn't protect everyone anymore. This was the cost of reclaiming myself. Halfway through dinner, she stood up abruptly. "If you think a piece of paper changes anything, you're mistaken," she said. I looked up at her. "It already has." Her eyes flared, but she said nothing else. She left the room, her footsteps echoing down the hall. The kids glanced at me, then back at their plates. "Eat," I said softly. "It's all right." It wasn't, but they didn't need to carry that truth yet. After clearing the dishes, I went to my room. The folder sat on my desk beside my notebook and keys. The lamp cast a narrow glow over the envelope. I opened the drawer, slid the folder in, and turned the key. One small turn of metal, one clear boundary. I'd spent most of my life-believing peace came from silence. Tonight I realized silence only keeps tyrants comfortable. I sat on the bed, the mattress dipping under my weight. My hands felt cold, but my chest was warm, the strange calm that comes after you finally stop asking permission to live freely. At 11:30 p.m., I wrote one line in the notebook. Delivered legal letter confirming independence. Reaction, volatile. Remain steady. Then underneath it, I added a sentence that wasn't for record-keeping, but for courage. Tomorrow she will understand this wasn't rebellion. It was survival. I looked toward the clock once more, its hands glowing faintly in the dark. The sound of ticking filled the room again, slower now, like a warning I could hear in my bones. By morning, peace will cost more than paper. "You're ruining this family!" Her scream split through the dining room before I even set down my fork. My son stood too, his voice rising, words colliding with hers until they blurred into a storm. The air smelled like burnt sauce and panic. I sat still, my plate untouched, watching them argue about loyalty, money, and everything that had been festering between us for months. "You embarrassed us with that letter," she shouted. "Who does that to their own family?" I kept my voice calm. "It was a notice, not an attack. It made me look like a thief." "If you weren't trying to take anything," I said quietly, "it wouldn't bother you." Her hand flew toward the table. The vase, the one my husband had given me on our 20th anniversary, toppled and shattered across the floor. The sound silenced everyone. Even the twins froze, their eyes wide, forks suspended mid-air. My son looked at me, torn again, caught between guilt and fear. The room went still. I stared at the broken glass scattered like spilled light. My hands didn't shake. "You just proved my point," I said. "Control always needs something to destroy." She blinked fast, breathing hard. "You twist everything." "No," I said. "I remember everything." The clock on the wall ticked past 7:40 p.m. Every second stretched thin, marking another line between what used to be love and what was left of it. My son muttered something about needing air and walked out. She followed, slamming the door so hard the frame trembled. The quiet afterward wasn't peace. It was exhaustion. I stood up slowly, careful not to step on the glass. The pieces glittered under the overhead bulb. I crouched, picked up the largest shard, and set it gently on the table. My reflection wavered in it, older, tired, but not broken. "Everything you break," I said to the empty room, "I'll keep as proof." I went to fetch the broom from the corner. Each sweep was deliberate. The glass chimed faintly as it met the dustpan, a sound that felt like an ending. I thought about my husband, about how that vase had once held tulips from the market we could barely afford back then. He'd said, "It's not about flowers, it's about effort." And now, decades later, effort had turned into evidence. I carried the fragments to the living room, spread an old towel on the coffee table, and laid them out like puzzle pieces. The largest shard still showed the painted blue streak he'd once said reminded him of the ocean. I pressed my finger to its edge. It was smooth in places, jagged in others, like us. From the fridge, I took down the twins' drawings, careful not to tear the tape. Their crayon houses, smiling suns, and stick-figure family still included me in the center. I folded them neatly and placed them beside the vase shards. My proof file was growing, not just of lies or manipulation, but of what I was protecting. Later that night, the house felt colder. I could hear the faint drip from the kitchen faucet and the soft hum of the refrigerator, little noises that made emptiness sound alive. I sat by the table again and opened my notebook. The last entry was from the day I delivered the legal letter. I added a new line. Vase broken during argument. Her rage uncontrolled. Child witness present. Then I underlined it twice. I closed my eyes for a moment. The weight of the silence pressed against me. The same silence she once used as a weapon, ignoring, belittling, pretending I didn't exist until I doubted my own memory. But silence can also be armor if you choose it. Tonight, it belonged to me. When my son came back, his voice was low. She went to her sister's, he said. She'll calm down. She doesn't need to calm down, I replied. She needs to stop lying. He looked at me helplessly. Mom, please, this is getting out of hand. It already was, I said. You just didn't want to see it. He sighed, rubbing his temples. I just want everyone to be happy. That's what I wanted too, I said softly. But peace built on silence isn't peace, it's surrender. He didn't answer. He just nodded and went upstairs. When his door closed, I turned back to the table. The glass shard caught the dim kitchen light, throwing a thin streak across the wall. It looked almost beautiful, like truth finally showing its edge. I gathered the towel with the fragments, placed them inside a small box, and slid it into the drawer with the notebook and old ring. Every act of cruelty leaves something tangible behind. People forget that. I wouldn't. Before turning off the light, I whispered to myself, they think I'll stay quiet. They're wrong. She threatened me, she cried. That was the first thing I heard when I opened the door. 2 officers stood behind her, their hands resting on their belts, expressions polite but distant. The porch light above us flickered once before holding steady. She had chosen her moment well, loud, emotional, trembling for effect. She said she'd hurt me if I didn't leave. Her voice cracked like a practiced line. I didn't answer. Not yet. I stepped aside so they could see me clearly. Officers, I said quietly, would you like to come in? One of them nodded. We just need to ask a few questions, ma'am. Of course, I said, moving toward the kitchen. My hands didn't shake. Margaret's voice from our last call echoed in my mind. Record everything, calmly. I reached for the small recorder on the counter, the same one I'd used since the bank incident. It was already on. Would you like to hear what actually happened? I asked. The taller officer gave a cautious nod. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room again, but this time from the speaker. Cold, calculated, unfiltered. You can't stop me, she'd said earlier that evening. You think a piece of paper makes you powerful? I'll make them believe you've lost it. Then silence, followed by the sound of a teacup being set down. Mine. My calm voice came through. You're angry. Let's talk tomorrow. That was all. Nothing threatening, no raised tone. The shorter officer looked up first. That's not what we were told. I didn't smile, but inside, something unclenched. I imagine not. They exchanged a glance, and I could see the professionalism melt into mild discomfort. We'll make a note of this, one said. For the record. She turned pale. You can't take her word over mine, she said sharply. We're taking the evidence, the taller officer replied. Her lips parted, but no words came out. My son appeared from the hallway, hair messy, eyes wide with confusion. What's going on? She called the police, I said I threatened her. He blinked, trying to process it. That's not true. The officer nodded toward him. Were you here when it happened? He hesitated, then nodded slowly. I heard everything. She's lying. For the first time, her confidence broke. Her hands fidgeted, twisting the hem of her sleeve. I misunderstood, she stammered. I thought she... But the words died halfway. The officers already knew. The report was being written. The one with the notebook spoke softly, almost apologetic. Ma'am, there'll be a record noting no threat was made. You don't have to worry. I never did, I said. They thanked me and left. Their car's headlights swept across the living room walls as they pulled away. She stood frozen by the doorway, her breathing shallow. "You recorded me?" she finally whispered. "You recorded yourself," I replied. "I just kept a copy." The silence stretched again, sharp as glass. My son looked at her, then at me. "You need help," he said quietly. To her, not to me. She didn't answer. She just walked out, grabbing her coat like it was armor, slamming the door behind her. The house fell quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I looked at the recorder still resting on the table. The little red light blinked twice, then went dark. Margaret had been right. "Truth doesn't need anger," she'd told me. "It needs witnesses and paper." I poured myself tea. My hands were steady this time. The taste was bitter, but clean. The porch light flickered again, and I let it. Outside, her car engine started, then faded into the distance. My son leaned against the counter. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "we let the report speak." He nodded, eyes heavy, and went upstairs. I stayed there a while longer, tracing the rim of my mug. The warmth had faded, but the weight of the moment hadn't. It was after midnight when I finally turned off the lights. The house was dark, but not lonely. I knew the police report would show the truth, stamped and dated, somewhere in their files. My name beside a simple statement, "No threat made." A small sentence, but enough to tilt the power back toward reality. Still, as I locked the door and glanced once more at the empty driveway, a thought surfaced, cold and certain. But lies don't end when truth is written. "You said I was unstable, remember?" That's how I began. My voice didn't tremble, though my hands ached from holding the edges of the clipboard too tight. The room at the community center was packed. Plastic chairs lined in rows, neighbors whispering in low tones, the air thick with curiosity and judgment. The moderator sat near the front, flanked by 2 volunteers. I could feel the hum of the fluorescent lights above us, steady and cold. Across from me she sat rigid, her lips pressed thin, pretending calm. My son sat beside her, staring at the floor. I caught the faint scent of stale coffee drifting from the refreshment table behind me. It reminded me of early mornings at the old house, back when truth still had warmth. The moderator cleared his throat. "We're here to discuss the events reported over the last few months. Please proceed." Margaret nodded to me from the second row, a small, quiet encouragement. She held the folder with my handwritten notes, neatly clipped together. I took a slow breath. "You accused me of threatening you," I said. "You called the police, told friends I'd lost control. You even warned my grandchildren not to hug me." She smirked slightly, a trace of defiance flickering back. "I was concerned for their safety." "Concern," I said, "doesn't sound like this." I took a page from the folder and read aloud, steady and clear. "Don't hug Grandma. She smells terrible." The words echoed longer than I expected. A few people shifted in their seats. Someone muttered something under their breath. My son's head sank lower. "She wrote that?" a voice whispered from the back. "Yes," I said, "repeatedly, to neighbors, friends, even to my church group." Margaret stood. "You're twisting things again. I said that jokingly. Everyone knew I was joking." The moderator raised a hand. "Please remain seated until you're addressed." But she didn't sit. "This is a smear campaign," she said. "She's manipulating everyone. She's always been dramatic." The witness chair creaked as a neighbor, Mrs. Powell, stood up hesitantly. "Excuse me," she said. "I live 2 doors down. I heard her say those things more than once. I told her to stop." Margaret turned sharply. "You're lying!" Mrs. Powell's voice didn't rise. "No, I'm tired of lies." The room fell silent again. The moderator nodded for her to continue. "She said the same thing at the park, at the grocery store. Sometimes she'd pretend to whisper, but she wanted people to hear." I didn't move. I just listened. Every word felt like bricks being laid, solid, irreversible. Margaret sat down finally, folding her arms tight across her chest. Another neighbor spoke. "I saw the police that night. I remember thinking she was too calm for someone who said she'd been threatened." The moderator scribbled notes on his pad. "We've heard enough to understand the pattern," he said quietly. Margaret's voice broke. "You're all turning against me. She's playing the victim." I stepped forward slightly. "No one's turning, Margaret. They're just seeing." The moderator gestured toward me. "Would you like to submit your written notes as part of the testimony?" "Yes," I said. "Every date, every statement is recorded. I kept them not to hurt her, but to remember what I survived." He nodded and took the clipboard. "This will be entered into the record." I looked around the room, at the faces that had once smiled politely in grocery aisles, at the same neighbors who'd quietly avoided eye contact when the rumors spread. They were looking at me differently now, not with pity, but with understanding. Margaret tried once more. "You're all believing a woman who's bitter and alone." The moderator leaned forward. "This isn't about belief, it's about consistency, and yours doesn't hold." Her eyes darted to my son. "Say something," she hissed. "You know your mother's—" He interrupted her softly. "Enough. I know what I saw." That sentence hit harder than anything else said that day. She froze. The fight drained from her face. I turned back to the moderator. "All I wanted was for the truth to exist somewhere official," I said. "Not gossip, not shouting, just acknowledgement." He nodded. "It will." A calm settled over the room, a stillness that didn't need noise to feel powerful. Picked up the apron I'd brought with me, the one she mocked for being old-fashioned. I folded it neatly and placed it on the table in front of her. "You used to say I hid behind this," I said. "Turns out it held me together." She looked away. The moderator closed the folder, signaling the end. "This hearing is concluded. Thank you, everyone, for your statements." People began to leave, their murmurs quiet but meaningful. Margaret stayed seated, staring at nothing. My son stood behind her, uncertain, conflicted. I didn't wait for either of them. Outside, the afternoon sun hit hard, reflecting off the car windows in the parking lot. I stopped near the door, taking a slow breath. The air smelled like rain about to start. For the first time in months, it didn't feel heavy. Justice hadn't come from punishment. It came from exposure. As I walked toward my car, I caught my reflection in the window. Older, yes, but free. Forgiveness will come, but not from me. "We'll move out for a while." That's how she said it. Flat, deliberate, and almost kind. The kind of kindness that hides sharp edges. My son stood behind her, his hands buried in his pockets, pretending to be busy with the phone he wasn't holding. The hallway light caught the dust in the air, turning it gold for a moment before it faded again. No one said goodbye at first. They just moved, quietly, efficiently. Boxes that had once carried Christmas ornaments, photo frames, and birthday cards were now filled with folded clothes, kitchen utensils, and the last of her perfume bottles. The children came to me first. They didn't say much, just wrapped their arms around me, the smallest one whispering, "Will you visit?" "Of course," I said, though we both knew it might be a long time before that happened. Her eyes met mine only once, and even then, just for a second. No anger, no guilt, just exhaustion. "This isn't forever," she said softly. "I know," I replied, "but it's enough." The front door creaked open. The sound of cardboard scraping against the floor filled the space. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. She'd wiped the counters one last time, as if tidiness could erase what was said inside these walls. At 10:15 a.m., their car engine started. I stood by the window curtain and watched them reverse slowly down the driveway. My son glanced back once, then looked straight ahead. The curtain brushed against my arm when I let it fall back in place. I turned toward the hall, empty. The echo of their footsteps lingered longer than I wanted it to. I walked into the kitchen, where 3 teacups sat on the counter. Only one was clean, the one I'd used that morning. I poured fresh water into the kettle and let it heat until the quiet became unbearable. When I set the cup down, I noticed the faint ring of old tea stains around the rim. It reminded me of every conversation we'd had in that kitchen. The good, the bad, the tired. The warmth had gone, but the memory stayed. Margaret had once told me, "Solitude isn't a punishment if you fill it with purpose." I hadn't understood then. I do now. I went to the ledger on the shelf, the one that held every household expense, every grocery note, every bill paid late because someone else's wants came first. I flipped it open. The last entry was her handwriting, dated a week ago. Groceries, $128. Car repair, $340. I traced the numbers with my finger. For years, money was another battlefield. Who paid, who owed, who gave more love, measured in receipts and deposits. Today, none of it mattered. The ledger would close here. By afternoon, sunlight filled the kitchen in long, patient lines. I opened the back window to let in the breeze. The curtain lifted slightly, then settled again, brushing my shoulder as if reminding me I was still here. I sat at the table with my tea, the spoon tapping gently against the cup. Every sound felt larger in the quiet, each breath, each movement. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel like exile. It felt earned. I could still see her suitcases in my mind, lined neatly by the door, her careful handwriting labeling each box. There was no chaos, no yelling, no final blow, just order. That was her last act of control, leaving gracefully enough to call it temporary. I know how this works. Pride leaves before love does. She'll tell people it was mutual, that we all needed space, that things will calm down eventually. Maybe she'll even believe it. But the truth isn't about who left. It's about who stayed. The house now holds my rhythm. My steps echo in every hallway, but they don't feel lonely. They feel honest. I poured a second cup of tea, though no one was there to share it. It wasn't habit, it was declaration, a small ceremony for peace. Later, I stood by the window again. The sun was lower now, the curtain glowing faintly around its edges. Out on the street, their car was gone, replaced by nothing but stillness. I thought about calling, then decided not to. Let the distance breathe. Let the silence do what words never could. When night comes, I'll turn off every light except the one in the kitchen. I'll leave it burning low, the same way I leave hope, small, steady, but real. They'll come back someday, maybe when her pride softens, maybe when he sees what truth costs. I won't wait with bitterness. I'll wait with patience. Because sometimes the only way to win is not to fight anymore. Peace isn't free. It's chosen. Mom, I didn't see it until now. That's how the letter began. His handwriting, uneven, slightly rushed, ran across the page in blue ink. The paper was creased at the corners, soft from being folded too many times. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, tucked between a utility bill and a grocery flyer. For a moment, I almost didn't notice it. Then I saw my name written on the envelope, the way he used to write it on birthday cards when he was young. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where we'd shared years of dinners and arguments. The sun came in weakly through the curtains, lighting the mug beside me. I traced the envelope with my thumb, feeling the raised texture of the paper. That simple touch pulled something deep from memory. The mornings I'd packed his lunch, the afternoons I'd waited for the sound of his key in the door. I opened the envelope slowly, careful not to tear it. The first line made me stop reading for a moment. Mom, I didn't see it until now. He went on. I thought silence would protect everyone. I thought keeping peace was better than telling truth. I was wrong. The words blurred for a second, not from tears, but from a strange rush of warmth and ache at once. He wrote about how long it took to realize what his wife's small cruelties had cost me, how he'd heard the rumors, noticed the coldness, but told himself I could handle it. He said he'd mistaken my quiet for strength, when really it was survival. He ended one paragraph with, "You never asked me to choose sides, but I did, by doing nothing." I read that line twice, then a third time. It was the most honest thing he'd ever written to me. He mentioned the hearing, how seeing the neighbors speak changed everything. He said he'd replayed the moment when the moderator asked her to stay, and how her eyes darted toward the exit. "That's when I knew," he wrote. "You weren't fighting for control. You were fighting for dignity." My hands trembled as I turned the page. The pen marks grew heavier near the end, the strokes pressing harder into the paper. "I'm sorry I didn't protect you sooner," he said. "I'm sorry for letting her words sit between us like truth. I want to make this right, even if it takes time." He'd drawn a small line beneath the last sentence, like he wanted to separate the apology from what came next. The next line read simply, "I miss home." That broke something in me, not pain, but the kind of release that follows it. I pressed the paper flat against the table, running my palm over it, feeling the faint indent of his writing under my fingers. Margaret's voice came back to me from months ago. "Healing doesn't come with permission," she'd said. "It starts the moment you're willing to touch what hurt you." And here it was, the proof that the silence had cracked. I made tea, the same way I always did, letting the water boil while I stood quietly by the window. Outside, the mail carrier walked past again, already moving to the next house. The world didn't know what that one envelope carried. I thought about all the things money had failed to fix over the years. The rent I helped him cover once, the repairs I paid for without mention, the savings I dipped into just to keep peace. This letter, though, cost nothing, and it gave back everything that mattered. When the kettle whistled, I poured the tea and read the letter again. Each word sounded clearer the second time, like it had been waiting to be heard out loud. Near the bottom, he'd added a postscript. "I told her she was wrong. I told her you didn't deserve any of it. She's quiet now. I don't know what will happen next, but I wanted you to know." I folded the letter carefully, placed it inside an old photograph frame on the counter. Behind the glass, his handwriting caught the afternoon light. It wasn't forgiveness yet, not all the way, but it was a start. The quiet in the house felt different that day. Not heavy, not sharp, just present. I looked around at the shelves, the framed photos, the vase that once broke and was glued back together, everything imperfect, but held. Then I read the last line again, the one that made my chest tighten and ease at the same time. He said he's bringing the kids next weekend. "Grandma, you don't smell bad at all." That line burst out of my granddaughter like sunlight through clouds, so bright and innocent, it almost broke me. She wrapped her little arms around my waist, pressing her cheek against my sweater. The twins followed, giggling, their laughter bouncing off the fence and up into the trees. The grass was still damp from the morning watering, its faint scent mixing with lemonade and cut stems. My son stood on the porch steps, watching. His smile carried both guilt and relief, the kind that knows how much time it takes to rebuild what was quietly broken. I met his eyes, then looked away before he could speak. Some things don't need words anymore. The backyard had changed since they left. The swing I fixed last month creaked slightly in the wind. The patch where the old flower bed used to be was now a soft green square, growing unevenly, like healing itself. The sunlight spilled across the yard, touching the teacup in my hand, the same one I'd nearly thrown away during one of those lonely nights when silence felt like defeat. I poured lemonade into glasses lined on the picnic table. The ice clinked, sharp and clean. "Careful, it's cold," I told them, and they laughed again, ignoring me, running barefoot in circles. Their joy was the sound I didn't realize I'd missed most. From the porch, my son called out softly, "They've been talking about this all week. They couldn't wait to come." I nodded, my voice low. "I'm glad they did." He took a few steps closer. "I should have brought them sooner." I didn't answer right away. I was too focused on the small, sticky hand that slipped into mine. "Grandma," one of them whispered, "can we play on the swing?" "Of course," I said. "It's yours now," as they ran toward it. Their laughter rose again, filling every corner of the yard that once held whispers and accusations. Months ago, those same walls had heard lies, ugly, cutting ones about me, about the way I smelled, the way I lived. But now, those echoes were gone. The space was lighter. I turned back to my son. "They're happy," I said quietly. "That's all that matters today." He nodded, his voice catching. "I don't expect you to forget." "I haven't," I replied, "but I'm learning to let the noise fade." He looked down, running his hand along the railing, the same one he'd painted years ago when we first moved here. "She's not coming," he said after a moment. "She wanted to, but I told her it's better if she waits." I let the words sit there. I didn't need to say that I already knew. The twins yelled for him from the swing set. "Push us, Daddy!" He smiled faintly, walked over, and started to push them gently, one hand on each back. I watched the scene like a photograph developing slowly in sunlight. Every motion, the lift, the drop, the sound of their laughter, felt like proof that time, in its strange way, does mend what's been shredded. When he turned to look at me again, I held up the teacup. "Remember this?" I said. He hesitated, then nodded. "You almost broke it." "I almost let them make me believe I was broken," I said. "Turns out, I wasn't." He swallowed hard. "Mom, thank you for letting me come back." "You didn't need permission," I said. "Just courage." The air was softer now, like the day itself had exhaled. I laid a folded blanket over the bench and sat down, sipping my lemonade slowly, feeling the condensation run over my fingers. The kids' laughter carried across the yard, loud, pure, defiant in its innocence. It was the only sound I needed. I looked at the swing again. It moved back and forth, the ropes squeaking faintly, the sunlight catching the metal hook above it. There was something perfect in its imperfection, like the way people repair what's left instead of replacing it. My son joined me at the table, eyes still following his children. "They'll remember this," he said softly. "I hope so," I answered. "Not the fights, not the silence, just this." We sat in quiet agreement, the kind of quiet that heals instead of hurts. I traced the rim of my teacup with my thumb, feeling its smoothness. The same insult that started all this, the one that made me question my worth, had been undone by a child's truth, a child too young to understand lies, too honest to repeat them. "Grandma, look how high I can go," one of them shouted, her hair catching the sunlight as she swung higher, laughing louder. That laughter, sharp, unfiltered, real, was everything I'd fought for. It wasn't revenge, it was restoration. I smiled, leaned back, and let the sound fill the space that once felt hollow. And for once, I didn't need to say a word. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me which city you're listening from. I read every comment. If the story touched you, you can support the channel with a super thanks, so I can keep bringing more stories like this every day. Your encouragement really helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what moment stayed with you. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's plenty more on the channel as well. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next life story. With respect and gratitude.